Every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
President-elect Trump promising in his victory speech to renew the American dream. And we're back now with the panel. Well, George, I think it's fair to say you made it very clear during the course of this year how you felt about Donald Trump. But putting that aside, how do you explain his victory? Why did he get elected president?
Got elected in part because he had a weak and untalented opponent who made tactical mistakes regarding some crucial states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And she promised continuity at a time when the country, by the right track, wrong track figures, said the country's on the wrong track. We want change, not continuity. All that said, he ran a brilliant campaign. It was antecedentless pronoun campaign. If you'd ask, what do you like about Donald Trump? He tells it like it is. And you could fill in the antecedent to the pronoun it. The transition has been a kind of shrug since then, saying, so, oh, never mind. We're not going to appoint a special prosecutor to lock her up. We're not going to deport 200,000 people a month to get 11 million people out of the country in 2 years. Doesn't matter, because what he brilliantly understood was the power of social media. One of the consequences of his victory will be, I think, that we'll hear very little from now on about campaign finance regulations and the power of money in politics. He was badly outspent because he understood you could go around that on the new platforms and make 30-second television spots marginally important.
Julie, why did Donald Trump win? And how do you explain it? And less so, why did Hillary Clinton lose?
I think there were a couple of reasons. I think one, he did see that there was anxiety in the country on a bunch of different fronts. Economic anxiety, anxiety over immigration, anxiety over terror threats that feel different than what we maybe have become accustomed to. And I think that he was authentic. You never felt with Donald Trump like he was speaking based on what he saw in internal polling or based on what he saw in focus groups. And he understood that for a lot of Americans, Democrats and Republicans, they look at Washington and don't really believe anything that they hear. And he was an antidote to that. And I think that that resonated with a lot of people, regardless of the actual words that were coming out of his mouth. The mere fact that he was willing to challenge Democrats and his own party, I think, was really appealing.
Let's turn, we've been talking about 2016, let's turn to 2017. Jerry, you and I are old enough to remember when Ronald Reagan came to this town and Clark Clifford, a big Democratic lawyer and insider, famously dismissed him as an amiable dunce. I have to tell you that I've been to some Christmas parties the last couple of weeks, talking to politicians of both parties, talking to some of our colleagues in the media who are dismissing Trump the same way and talking about what a disaster he's going to be as president. I'm sure you've had that same experience. What do you think are the chances that they are going to be as wrong as Clark Clifford was about Ronald Reagan?
Well, you and I lived through the Reagan experience with George. We all did. And I think that there was an evolution in the Reagan presidency, but there was also an evolution in Reagan the president. But I think the key was that Ronald Reagan was smart enough to surround himself with people who made up for whatever deficiencies he had. And he had a vision. He had an ideology. Donald Trump doesn't have an ideology or a vision. He's transactional. It'll be different. Now, was that going to be more effective or less effective? I don't know, but I think the parallel to Reaganism and the Reagan presidency falls down there. There's not some ideological North Star for the Trump presidency. There's going to be getting business done, making transactions. But there was an underestimating of Ronald Reagan as a person and a leader, and I wonder if there isn't the same about Donald Trump. Well, I mean, we've been through a year of underestimating Donald Trump, right? So there's ample reason to think that will continue. You know, what Donald Trump really understood that all the other campaigns did not really understand wasn't that there was an idea, there was a desire for change, or that there was a desire to bring in an outsider. Other campaigns, other candidates got that. What he understood was the anger in the country, and he tapped into that, and then he stoked it. Now, can you continue to do that as president? Is that a safe thing to do as president? That, to me, is a big question we'll confront in 2017 and 2018 and beyond.
Chris, the biggest loser in 2016 was Washington, D.C., and it's not even close. the norms and assumptions that they have about politics, about the way that it's supposed to work, were entirely rejected by a Jacksonian revolt of the American people, a people who have become frustrated with what they felt like was a city that was happy to play to their interests during campaign years and then ignore them once they actually got into office. I think what we saw this year was Donald Trump tap into the anxieties of an American people who are very much aware that we're at a period of time now where labor force participation is at near 40-year lows. You have 95 million adult Americans who are out of the workforce. You have a rise in racial tension. You have a rise in economic anxiety. You have a rise in disgust and distrust for our institutions. And they wanted someone who represented a dramatic change. They've sent their message to Washington. We're now going to see whether Donald Trump is actually able to deliver on the.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask. That's a good way to campaign, but how do you transform that into accomplishments as president?
I think that we're going to see his approach as it plays out over the coming months, and we're going to have to assess it as it is. I think we've made the mistake all along over the course of this year of judging a lot of the decisions that he's made too early, where we should have been more humble, I think, in looking at the bigger picture.
That's in very short supply in Washington. Yeah.
I think humility. I think we should have humility about this. The reality is he's naming a lot of people who have achieved a lot of great things in terms of industry or have experience within the military or elsewhere. We're going to have to assess whether these kind of change agents, just as we saw with new people coming in Andrew Jackson's revolt in the past into Washington, whether they're able to come into these institutions and change them or whether they are changed by them.
But I do think there's going to be some disappointment among those people who took some of the things George referred to, said in the campaign literally. They're not necessarily going to happen. And there will be a period somewhere down the line where there's real disappointment that, oh, that didn't happen. You said it was going to happen. It didn't happen that way, because that's a little unrealistic.
George is probably the only person here other than myself who covered Andrew Jackson. Your thoughts about that parallel?
Well, I think it's fair that there is a Jacksonian streak in this country. Born Fighting is the title of Jim Webb's book about them. They're truculent people, and their truculence was heard this year and made itself felt. Can I just say one thing? I think 10 years from now, people may look back and say the big loser this year was not Washington, it was Brussels. That the most important vote taken this year was not November 8th, but June 23rd, when the British left the European Union and began the unraveling of that project, which I heartily.
And with the terrible attack this week in Berlin and what that says about migrants and migrant policy and the open door, that's going to only continue, isn't it?
It is. I hasten to add that I heartily supported Brexit. So this was not a total loss of a year.
Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday.